What up? What up? Welcome to the Sixers Talk podcast. So glad you could join us. Danny Pommells, along with Noah Levick from NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. Ben Barry, our super producer, is in the cut. We appreciate you joining us. Thanks for tuning in. We're brought to you by Wilmington University. WilmU works a lot of basketball since we last joined you. 3 games, in fact. The most notable of which would be the Miami Heat game, which was the Sixers' only loss in that stretch as they go 2-1, and James Harden did not play as the Sixers sunk to 82 points produced in that game. Harden hit a couple of milestones last night in a win over the Bulls. Embiid hit for 43. A lot to get to, as well as the Ben Simmons discussion as we're creeping up on that Thursday Brooklyn Nets game and all that we know about that. Noah, on your 3 observations on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, you make some great points, and I'm really interested, before we get to that, to get your perception on this 3-game stretch as the Sixers get 2 wins and the loss against Miami. Big surprise to sit James Harden in that back-to-back. Many of us were caught off guard by that. But it does make some sense, particularly after you hear his comments about them having a regimen to get this hamstring, where it should be. We see him running the stairs a la Rocky, a la Roy Halladay after the game against the Bulls. He's dripping with sweat as he steps to the podium after the game, and you're wondering, what was going on. And then you see he was hitting the stairs, right there with fans around, the Wells Fargo attendants there as well. So Harden just not bashful at all about being about his business. Big picture stuff first, Noah, before we get into the strong details of all that's going on with this team. Thoughts and perspectives about this 3-game stretch and Harden sitting out that Miami Heat game.
Yeah, for me, I wouldn't necessarily classify it as a surprise just because he hadn't played basketball for several weeks before becoming a Sixer, and then he averaged over 36 minutes a game over his first 4 with the team. And they had a really difficult home road back-to-back on the schedule. And, of course, the catastrophic worst-case scenario here is one of the Sixers' 2 All-Stars getting hurt. And it's very important to do everything within your power to ensure that doesn't happen. So I thought it was a prudent move. And as you said, James Harden last night feels good about the team's plan and the process for ensuring he hits the playoffs in peak physical condition. So I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was logical and all of that. As far as the game, it was an ugly one for the Sixers. I think the Miami Heat do deserve some credit. Threw a ton of bodies at Joel Embiid, and the Sixers didn't make them pay for that. Shot 17% from 3, their worst outing of the season. And I think, of course, the circumstances, getting into Miami very late off a difficult home game, one where they had to work until the end, that contributed, of course. And it's not a loss that I think the Sixers beat themselves up over or felt horrible about, just because there's the recognition that sometimes the schedule puts you in a tough spot and you can't always overcome that. And then, I think the wins that bookended it, again, were very encouraging from an offensive perspective. This team has yet to score under 120 points when James Harden is in the lineup. They're 5-0 with him. And not every single thing has worked to perfection in all of those games. Last night was one where Harden finally didn't have a hot shooting night, but he again piles up a bunch of assists, makes guys better, notably Matisse Thybulle. The pick and roll chemistry, you see that emerging, and you see Harden continuing to find Thybulle on cuts and make an effort to include him offensively. And then Joel Embiid gets back to himself and scores 43 points. And the Sixers get some nice contributions off the bench as well. Again, one of those being from George Niang, who is not bashful about shooting and just really wants the ball in important spots and is loving playing with James Harden. He said last night, it's like a dream. So I think, sure, the Sixers were going to eventually lose a game in the James Harden era, but If you told them in that 3-game stretch that the one loss was the game Harden didn't play, I think they would have preferred that, because it indicates that when they've got their best lineup on the floor, this continues to be a very formidable basketball team.
A video circulating around social media of Niang, Tyrese Maxey, and Harden all hanging out together in Miami. So the chemistry is certainly blossoming and growing, and you can see Harden and Niang having some of that chemistry, as well as you mentioned that pick and roll stuff with Thibault. And James saying after the game that he feels like it's his responsibility to get Thibault more involved offensively because he's given them so much on the defensive end. James feeling like, getting Thibault some easy baskets, and he assisted on every one of Matisse's made free field goals. That was really important to getting the team more involved. And it's just crazy how you hear him say that and take that stance that, developing Matisse and developing other players and setting guys up. I mean, he's second in the league in assists, and you could see him with Chris Paul, being banged up, taking over the lead in assists. And suddenly the Sixers have the NBA's top scorer and the top assist guy on the same team. Just really a moment for Harden and the Sixers to remember last night, because he ties Reggie Miller for the made three-pointers, third all-time on the NBA's list, and he also passes Paul Pierce for 9th all-time on made free throws on the NBA's list. So it just gives you an idea of just the impact and the career that this guy, James Harden, is developing and continues to develop here with the Sixers.
Indeed, and my impression is James Harden is genuinely appreciative when he hits those milestones, and it makes him reflect on all the work he's put in and the way it's paid off. I think, understandably, someone with that much experience is jaded toward certain things about professional basketball, and not every game feels like a big game, but those milestones and those big names and that illustrious company is meaningful to him. So yeah, he got it in typical James Harden fashion. I think it was after back-to-back Niang threes. The crowd was really fired up. He sizes up Troy Brown Jr. and nails a step-back three. Missed a few attempts to pass Miller, but we all know that's going to happen at some point. And I'm sure he's going to rocket up that free throw list as long as he remains healthy. I think he's well known for his ability to draw fouls. And of course, we've seen in the early days with the Sixers, they just every single game seem to have a significant advantage in that category, which allows them to compensate for some of the areas where they are weaker. Like last night, the rebounding, was a problem in the first half. But if game after game you're shooting 10, 12, 15 more free throws than the other team, probably going to score a lot of points. You're probably going to stop runs. You're probably just going to be really well positioned to, at a minimum, have a chance. And James Harden has given them that. And there's also the acknowledgement from everyone that there's still a lot to learn, just with some of the nuances of how to play with each other and how to maximize each other's talents. So I think offensively, it is totally fair to be very, very optimistic about what this team can accomplish.
Here we are, 18 games left. The Sixers sitting firmly in the second spot, 3 games back of Miami Heat. So with that loss to Miami, they do lose some ground in the standings. And with 18 games to go, it's going to be difficult for them to capture that number 1 spot or recapture it as the defending Eastern Conference regular season champions. But sitting in the 2 spot is no shame at all, particularly as you've played the Cavs, Bulls, and Bucks here in short order over the last few games and have come out victorious against those teams. But the schedule doesn't get any easier. Definitely a lot of important games coming up. We mentioned the Brooklyn game coming up, Denver, Cleveland, Dallas, Toronto, Miami, 2 LA games, Clippers and Lakers. So definitely some unfinished business here for the 76ers team. And you mentioned the fact that Harden doesn't have a great night, goes 5 for 15 from the field, and they still have his I wouldn't say dominance, but his hand on the game. He's controlling a lot of the action and what happens for the Sixers offensively. I think there's just his determination and competitiveness was something that I probably underestimated, and his willingness to make his teammates better. And so much he's received so many slights and criticisms for how he played in Brooklyn, and so much of what people are seeing here in these 5 games he's played for the 76ers, people feel like they weren't seeing in Brooklyn. But regardless of what was happening there, what he's doing here is phenomenal and exactly what this franchise needs. And the points per game is completely evident of that. You bring up the fact that they haven't dipped below 120 per in the games that he has played with them, and they're a perfect 5-0. His impact, in the early going, okay, Minnesota, the Knicks is one thing, but here we are, 5 games in of his Sixers tenure, and they continue to roll like they do. Do you feel like where we are right now can get even better, or the Sixers are at a point where we're seeing the best of what this team can be as these things continue to develop with the Matisse stuff as well as George Niang coming around?
I do think there's a little room for at least internal improvement. Tobias Harris still hasn't quite found his spot, and shots aren't dropping for him. Doc Rivers said he's not concerned about that. Shooters make shots, but the Sixers would sure like Harris to do that at a higher rate. And I think just even the nuances with the star players, they're not yet anywhere near fully developed. Joel Embiid said last night he made it a point of emphasis to short roll and roll last game and this game and try to be dominant in and around the paint because he felt like he had gotten away from that the past couple of games. And he said he basically attributed that to why he wasn't on the same page with James Harden once or twice, including one play where Harden threw behind the back pass expecting Embiid would pop, and it ended up being a turnover. Like little stuff like that, yeah, I expect they probably will clean that up over the next 15 or 20 games, and they'll probably be a little better overall. Now, of course, there will be more tape for opponents to study, and they will see different approaches and have to adapt to that. James Harden, of course, was not available in the Miami game where the Sixers probably would have faced a lot of zone if he was on the court. So I think, there's only so much within your control as a team. And I think the Sixers will get better at some of that stuff. And then it'll be fascinating to see how opponents adapt to them as well. But in a big picture sense, no, I don't think this is the peak version of the Sixers. I do think they have room to get better, which is a reason to be high on their chances of winning a championship if everything falls into place.
Harden not having a great night, but Tyrese Maxey continues to show that he's ready and willing to do whatever it takes for this team to win. Not a fantastic shooting night, but continues to sock it to him from 3-point range, 2 for 5, right around that 40% mark. And Maxey just continues to have another gear that no one can seem to catch up with. He continues to be undaunted and unfazed by mistakes or, getting his shot blocked and continues to stick his nose in there. We have seen the emergence of Tyrese Maxey and his growth over these games this season in general, and then particularly with Harden in the fold. What do you make of the way that they've been able to form this big three and the way Niang has complemented those 3 guys coming off the bench? Because, so much many people have been waiting for Tobias Harris to come along, but it seems like George Niang is coming into the fold as a guy who's really been complimented by Harden's play and gained confidence and seems to just find those seams. And we heard Niang talk after the game about, the ball just being, right where he can catch it and shoot it. And his job's just so much easier by the way Harden has been making him, setting him up.
Agreed. I do think George Niang deserves a lot of praise and credit, but don't want to overdo it and portray him as, vastly superior to Tobias Harris across the board. I think last night was a great example of Tobias Harris genuinely being valuable in a lot of spots defensively. His defense on DeMar DeRozan, I thought, was by and large very solid, and he was good in one-on-one spots, and he made his life difficult in contested shots. And sure, Joel Embiid played a huge role there with aggressive pick and roll coverage, and the Sixers did a nice job blitzing and making good subsequent rotations off those blitzes and all of that. But Tobias Harris, as a one-on-one defender, was pretty damn solid, and I don't think that should just go totally overlooked, and that there should be a complete fixation on some of the struggles offensively. But absolutely, moving forward, if Harris is not taking all of the catch and shoot threes, or he's missing an extraordinarily high percentage of them, that lowers the Sixers' potential, and it makes Doc Rivers' decisions more difficult on, are there spots where the right move is to prefer Niang over Harris to close a game, or to be a part of a lineup, in a certain matchup or what have you. So I think for now, the Sixers probably should be pretty happy that George Niang has adjusted well. They're 5-0 with James Harden. And I think Doc Rivers knows Tobias Harris has a long resume of being a productive scorer and knocking down more shots than he is right now. And he does believe that he's going to come around here at some point offensively.
Someone who has not come around offensively, and we've talked about on the podcast, and I don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but Furkan Korkmaz goes from the starting lineup to the end of the bench here in short order. From the Heat game, he was in the starting lineup and continued to show some of the same tendencies that we've seen. And he didn't take his warm-up off here against the Chicago Bulls. And Isaiah Joe getting featured more, Shake Milton getting more opportunities. Just not the amount or bevy of shots you would think. I mean, you look at the bench itself, and Niang shoots 7 field goals, and Isaiah Joe has 4. The next closest person to him, and everyone else just has 1 field goal attempt. Do you look at the way that Doc has kind of banished Korkmaz as a little too heavy-handed? Would you have expected to see him in the rotation at least? Or are you more of the ilk that it's time for Shake and Isaiah Joe to get some looks here? Where that's probably where I stand, where I'm looking to see whoever can contribute and give them something that Korkmaz hasn't. And possibly these guys, Shake and Isaiah Joe, could find some rhythm with James Harden, or could be, complimentary to him if they're able to get on the floor with him and show what they can do. So I'm willing and ready to see other options besides Furkan.
Right. I think you could certainly argue this should have happened a lot sooner, that Isaiah Joe should have gotten a chance. And that's how Rivers framed it last night. Like, he described Furkan Korkmaz as up and down, which I think is generous, but given Isaiah Joe a shot to see what he can do. And there's still a little time left here to jostle for position and to secure a playoff spot. And perhaps Joe does it despite being a young player and being someone where the Sixers have concerns about his ability to guard physically larger players. But he's a pure shooter, and it's not a high bar to be a better shooter than Furkan Korkmaz has been this year. It's just not. So, that is very much there for the taking, and perhaps Isaiah Joe seizes it. He did knock down one big corner 3 in the fourth quarter, and that was great. And if he can continue to do that when he gets opportunities. Maybe he continues to keep Furkan Korkmaz on the end of that bench. But my impression is it's not yet settled. Rivers is willing to let a competition play out, and we'll see how it goes. I think, as I've discussed before, Shake Milton just brings more to the table than Korkmaz. He doesn't need to hit shots in the same way to be a neutral or positive impact player. And Tyrese Maxey has talked about how he loves playing with Milton. He likes having that other ball handler on the floor with him, and someone with just some versatility to his game who can get into the paint and knock down a mid-range shot through contact, or can drive and kick a little more comfortably than Korkmaz. So Furkan Korkmaz has been on the precipice quite a few times in his Sixers tenure, and maybe he comes back from the brink again. But Lord, I think for the time being, the fact that he didn't play last night, like no one's going to have a great argument as to why that shouldn't have been the case.
Bro, Danny Green goes to the locker room with a cut on his finger, and Furkan still doesn't get any burn. Like they lose a guy, and the Doc's like, all right, the rotation is fine. I don't need anybody else getting any burn. So it's difficult to see how Furkan comes out of this. But like you said, he has risen from the ashes before, and I would say proven his worth. But it's been so long since we had one of those 7 3-pointer games from Furkan, 5 3-pointer games.
Right, and honestly, heading into this game, I was thinking, well, he did have one of those against the Bulls. I want to say there was a weekend a few years ago where I think it was the Bulls and the Grizzlies, and he was just on fire against both teams. So he does have those in his arsenal. It's just been a long time since we've seen them. The consistency is not there, and Isaiah Joe deserves a shot. So fair enough to see what he can do, and I'll be curious to see what he makes of this.
I want to go back to a point that we were talking about earlier. I just want to dabble on it a bit more. Matisse Thybulle in the starting lineup. Some people weren't sure if it would be Danny Green, if it would be Matisse that would take over those minutes after the trade of Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, Ben Simmons. Matisse is in the lineup now. He goes a couple of games, I think he went back-to-back games and hadn't scored. You can correct me on that, but and then all of a sudden we see this pick and roll wrinkle with him and James Harden, and it working well, and Matisse slashing and getting opportunities. Do you think that was something purposeful on the coaching staff's part, or was that more James initiating that? What's your feeling on how that came about? And just, we're talking about, how this team comes together and new wrinkles and things like that. That seems like something that's very promising that they can build on and hopefully continue to get Matisse, more involved in the offense to complement the defensive pressure.
Yeah, 100% purposeful. I guess it was before the Cavs game. You notice that as opposed to previous iterations of the team, there were a lot of non-big guys setting ball screens for Harden, which of course made sense given he's had success with that particular action in past stops. And yeah, so asked Rivers about it, and he said, they like it so far, and of course it's going to be something significant for them moving forward because Harden is one of those star players where the opponent says, this is the guy who's guarding James Harden, and they don't want to deviate from that. But of course, in the pick and roll, the preference is to put a lot of pressure on Harden, hedge hard and try to make him relinquish the ball. So you combine those factors, and then you have a non-big setting a screen, and it really enables Harden himself to either get downhill and just capitalize on that advantage, or as you saw last night, he can pinpoint the openings where that non-big rolls and gets a free route to the rim. a la Bruce Brown, on the Brooklyn Nets, and of course Houston during Daryl Morey's final year, famously went small in the second half of that season and went no big men because the ball screens for James Harden with non-guards. He is brilliant at maximizing those situations, whether it's creating the shot for the teammate or for himself. So with Matisse Thybulle in particular, Rivers said last night the preference is like to have him kind of sprinting down the floor and then setting that step-up screen. So the defense is on its heels. And again, it's just a way to sort of highlight the best talents of the players on the floor. Thybulle's really fast. He's athletic. And James Harden is great at passing and hitting rollers. So when the ingredients, all combine the right way, it looks like it did last night. As we said, like the Sixers will see many pick and roll coverages. This will now be on opponents' scouting reports when maybe it wasn't on the Bulls scouting report. And we'll see how the Sixers adapt to all of this. But absolutely, Thybulle is a screener and roller. The Sixers coaching staff likes that idea, and I totally understand why.
We saw the debut of DeAndre Jordan last night as well. We saw him on the bench in Miami, and we saw almost an opportunity where Jordan almost brought the house down off of alley-oop early on with Harden. Didn't quite come to fruition, but some good minutes from DeAndre, and you can see him deterring shots and, being valuable and, getting to some loose balls and setting things up for Sixers with second chance points. Hey, so far so good, right? I mean, not bad.
Solid debut. Yeah. You see some of the areas where he's predictably not the strongest backup center in the league. There are more mobile guys. There are more defensively versatile players, but it was noticeable that in comparison to Paul Millsap, who was out for this game for personal reasons, defenders are aware that there is a near 7-foot player in the lane, and if they go up for a layup, hey, it might get blocked. Like DeAndre Jordan might swat that shot, and I don't think you could say the same for Paul Millsap, who stands 6'7". I think with Jordan, it is clearly helpful that there is the existing chemistry with Harden and the understanding that he has a simple role here. It's to protect the paint and screen and roll and bring energy and be a positive, smiling presence on the bench, which looks very natural for him. And he's known as a gregarious teammate and someone guys like to be around. And just be solid and do his part in helping the Sixers break even or something similar to that in the non-Embiid minutes each night. So decent start, and it would have been a spectacular start if it began with a Lob City-esque, quasi tomahawk, righty alley-oop slam. But even without that, he set up 6 points directly, off offensive rebounds. One of them on a kick-out pass. One of them where he just tapped the offensive board out to Niang for an important 3 in the fourth quarter. Some of that's a little bit fortunate, but I think it also shows that he's active on the glass. He should help the Sixers a little with rebounding, you hope, and he ideally will provide a little of what they have very noticeably lacked at the backup center spot.
We're going to take a quick time out here on the Sixers Talk podcast. Noah and I are going to hit the stairs a la James Harden as we take this quick break. So you enjoy this commercial and we'll hit the stairs. All right, Noah, let's go.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilmU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
Out of breath from running those stairs, but welcome back to the Sixers Talk podcast. Thanks for sticking with us. We're brought to you by Wilmington University. WilmU works. We have reached the soap opera portion of the show, the All My Children, Young and the Restless moment, where we're going to talk about Ben Simmons and nothing about him playing basketball, just about him sitting on the bench on Thursday against this Brooklyn Nets team, who now currently sit ninth in the Eastern Conference, 11 and a half games back at 32-33. They've lost 4 in a row. They're 3-7 in their last 10. The Sixers shouldn't be that daunted or concerned about this game on Thursday, but there is this emotional part of Simmons sitting on the bench, according to Shams Charania, confirmed by our John Clark, that Ben will be there. I am on the Ben Simmons watch tomorrow. I'm going to do some type of story on Simmons, whether it be the people waiting outside of the hotel, rehashing some of his time here, something Simmons related. I will be on tomorrow. So is it worth it, Noah? All this hoopla, all these people just wanting to boo him, all this vitriol for this guy. Why would he even put himself through this? Is it worth it? Why would he put himself through this? I guess are my two thoughts.
I guess to the second question for Simmons, if he's going to be back playing basketball games in the playoffs, and that's the aim, the Sixers might face the Nets in the playoffs, and I think he'd be better off if he's at least been in Wells Fargo Center again. That's probably nice to have that box checked off and just get this over with. But I think the expectation is, on his end, it's going to be a highly unpleasant experience, and that Sixers fans are determined to make it that way, even if he's not on the floor. That he's going to hear quite a lot of malicious words and a lot of spite from wherever he is, on that Brooklyn bench. For Sixers fans, you're entitled to feel however you feel. Of course, the hope is that folks don't cross the line, and but there's going to be a lot of people who I think are very tempted to do so. And you just hope it doesn't spill over into anything ugly, and that everyone's able to get out of the night okay and play a basketball game and move on in some sense, at least until that potential playoff matchup. But for Simmons, I'm sure he is well aware of what the reception will be like. Yeah.
Closure. You're talking about some closure. Will there be some closure just seeing him on the bench, or people need to see him on the floor in order to have that thing come full circle and kind of move on from that?
I don't think that feels like closure. I guess it feels like a next step in this saga that has been characterized by absurd levels of stagnancy and lack of movement and waiting. At least it's something new. It's a step forward, and that the plan is for him to be in the arena where he last played basketball, and where he experienced a very low and disappointing postseason moment with the team he made 3 All-Star games with. So it's significant. I'm not going to try to describe it as anything else, but is it closure, or will many people feel that way about it? I think probably not, is my sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's not basketball. You know what I mean? It's just people coming for the spectacle of it all, to kind of it's like the oddities, like the circus, the bearded lady or something. Like, they're just coming to look and stare and point and yell. And I don't know if I'm really here for all that. I get the vitriol. I get the pain, the frustration. I get all of that. But from a basketball standpoint, they might not play the Brooklyn Nets. They could. And at the same time, Sixers fans are getting all of the benefits of this trade, all of the reward. They're winning games. You could focus on that and not on, just booing Ben Simmons, because it's still a big game. It's still Kevin Durant. It's still, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's still Embiid and, they waving bye-bye to each other after the game and the competitiveness and all that. So there's definitely more angles to enjoy. Even if Simmons wasn't there, like, it would be a great game. It would be fun to watch. It would be an Eastern Conference showdown between two of the best players on the planet. 3 of 4, whoever plays, Kyrie, Durant, Harden, Embiid, of the great players on the planet. So there's much more to enjoy than just booing Ben Simmons. But Doc Rivers entertained a question or two about Simmons' return. One of them around a Twitter thought of someone saying that, will they have a tribute video for Ben Simmons when they return on Thursday? And Doc going on record saying, yeah, why not? Why wouldn't they have a tribute video? Like, he's done some great things here. And I think that will play into the crowd, that anger and resentment. So I don't think they should do that, although he probably does deserve a tribute video if we're really keeping it honest on how opposing players are treated when they come back to a place where they played and, devoted themselves to. But what did you make of that Doc Rivers question and the way he answered it? And what do you make of the idea of how the team, the organization, should receive Simmons on Thursday?
Right. I think he was right to call it a loaded question. My perspective on that is they had tribute videos for TJ McConnell and JJ Redick. And
I think Rocco might have had one too.
That sounds right as well. Yeah. And no disrespect to either of those players, but Ben Simmons on the basketball court was better than both of them in Philadelphia. Like, he made 3 All-Star games. And I think he deserved to make every one of those All-Star games. So just purely on merit, like, does he deserve a tribute video? Yeah, of course. I mean, but of course there's a lot more to it, and it is indeed loaded. And I agree with your gut feel that a tribute video or anything just directing a spotlight on Simmons is going to exacerbate anger, and the Sixers are in a tough spot for that reason as to how exactly they handled this situation. I think a decent way to manage it might just be doing like a tribute video for all 3 guys. Maybe Seth,
for Simmons, Drummond, and Seth. Yeah.
Right. Drummond, okay, was only a half season, so maybe that sort of player wouldn't typically get a tribute video. Seth Curry might have been borderline tribute video worthy on his own. He had the best, season and a half of his career here, and had some great moments in the playoffs last year. But just like
fans liked them. And fans liked them.
Likeable guy, played hard. So maybe that's a way to manage it and not make it Ben Simmons tribute video. But okay, a big trade happened. 3 of the guys are back here. Let's acknowledge them, and maybe that disperses a little of the potential hatred that could be directed solely at Simmons if they did a Simmons tribute video. But it's an impossible situation for the team, and I think whatever the team does, the overall sentiment from fans is going to be the same. It's going to be loud boos for Ben Simmons.
Yeah, Sixers fans are petty, and they don't forget. And Ben Simmons has brought out in this stalemate with the team and him deciding that he doesn't want to play here, he has brought out all of that underbelly, all of that, the dark side, so to speak, of how people feel and whatnot, and those strong opinions. So there are other things to focus on. It doesn't have to all be about Ben Simmons, but so many people will be there for that fact. And it's weird. Okay, yeah, you want to get over it, but to put yourself through what you anticipate will happen on Thursday doesn't seem like a great mental health decision, but we'll kind of leave that for what it is because everyone deals with those issues differently. But I just really see, like you said, hopefully things don't go left, but the potential for that is definitely there. And hopefully the Sixers get the win as they continue to build with this James Harden effect that is really propelling them up the standings and in the right direction. Before we get out of here, Noah, we will rejoin you guys on Thursday. Any last thoughts before we take a break until this Nets extravaganza comes to town?
I think it's a little ironic that James Harden, at least in this market, is somewhat under the radar. Like he's playing a team that just traded him, and normally that would be a
kind of the afterthought.
Would be a huge focus on him, and as you said, like the fact that it has started so incredibly with the Sixers, that he's 5-0 as a Sixer and playing great basketball, and it does feel like a little bit of an afterthought. And I will say the Nets have lost 17 of 20 games, and they've got major concerns and major uncertainty for their season. But for me, like watching them against the Bucks, watching them against the Celtics, they still have stretches where they do seem just so hard to stop, and they do seem like a team where maybe everything just does come together and they figure out a way to make a deep playoff run and fulfill all this potential that everyone thought they had. So I think on the court, like the Sixers there's a chance that they'll be punished if they don't play a high-level basketball game. So I agree with you that the on-court action should be good to watch, and it will be inevitably overshadowed somewhat by all of the attention on Ben Simmons. But I think the game is one that I personally, I'm looking forward to seeing play out and seeing if the Sixers can go to 6-0 with James Harden in their lineup.
Be sure to join us as we help build up the excitement ahead of this Brooklyn-Philadelphia matchup on Thursday, a live Sixers Talk podcast coming to you before the game. Be sure to check it out. For Noah Levick and Ben Berry, I'm Danny Pommells. We're brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works. We'll see you next time on the Sixers Talk podcast.